Hi everybody. Today we are just going to do a video on the difference between a regular foot, a C foot, and a D foot. And today we are joined by Blarney and Dublin. Yay! Which they're not sitting down quietly, so we'll see. Okay. So right here you can see I have a number 1 foot, a number 1 C, and a 1 D. And I'm going to go over the difference and their importance of it. So I have on my machine a 9mm stitch plate, so I can do the widest stitch my machine does, which is 9mm. Some machines, Bernina's, do 5.5mm, which is a regular stitch width, but some of our other machines, like the 790, they do a 9mm. So does a 590, a few others too. So that's a really nice feature to have, a super wide stitch width. Okay, so the first one I'm going to show you is a number 1 foot. So this is used on all 5.5mm sewing machines. So when I put it on, I'm going to tell my machine that it has a number 1 foot on. Okay. And there it is. And you can see when I go to do a straight stitch, or sorry, a zigzag, it will only do 5.5, even though my machine can do a 9mm, it won't with this foot. So any machine that only has a 5mm stitch width, you only need to buy the 5mm, which is the 1 or anything that's not a C or a D. So as you can see, I'll just sew this. Okay, so there's my 5mm. So when I go to the C though, the C is for coated. So this is the coated part. And you always want to protect that. You don't want that stretch, because that's what communicates to the machine that it's a 1C. So it has a wider opening to accommodate the 9mm stitch. So I can put this on. And then I'm going to tell my machine that it has a 1C. Okay? And then as soon as I do that, you can see that now I can move this as wide as 9mm. So I can do a 9mm stitch with that. So that's the difference. Sorry, blur of the light in the stitch width. Okay. Now if I put on another one with my machine and I tell it number 1. It will automatically go back, even though I had it at 9mm, it will go back to the 5.5. Okay. And then, let's see, sorry, go to foot, and let's see 1C. Okay. So it goes back to the 9. Okay, now the next one is 1D, and you'll see that it's coated. So it's like a C, but it has the addition of the D. So if a machine is dual feed, it has the 9mm stitch. So it will do the 9mm stitch. This part's wide. I just want to show you a trick. When this is closed, you can see like this has a slot to pull the thread through. When it doesn't, what I do is before, I just put my foot out like that, pull the thread through, and then I put the foot on. Okay, so now I can do a 9mm again. Okay, and I'm just gonna go to my feet and I'm gonna go 1D. Okay, So now I can do a 9mm stitch. Okay, let's go back to my stitches, sorry. So there's a straight stitch, and now I can make this all the way up to 9. But the added thing with the D, that is for dual feed. So I'm gonna bring my dual feed up. So it's just in the back here, and I just bring it down and it hooks onto the back here. So the difference too with a dual feed and a walking foot, so if I'm quilting, I definitely use my walking foot. Probably have it here. And the difference with that is this hooks up onto the needle bar. Actually, I'll show you that. So I'm just going to bring this around. See, this goes on the needle bar. And let's press clear. We're going to go to number 50, which is the walking foot. And I could do up to 5mm stitch with it, and it knows that because I told what foot it's on. So it will do a 5.5mm zigzag, but you can see when I use this, and I'll just do one, this, because it's on the needle bar, it every time the needle moves, it moves these feeds. So this is gonna feed multiple layers of fabric like a quilt, and that's how these move. So it's like having feed dogs on the top and the bottom, and it's meant for multiple layers, where differential feed is meant for difficult fabrics, really super slippery fabrics that don't feed well. It does help with precise sewing too, like if you just find that you're a little tiny bit off on something, it's going to give that added feed. But the dual feed, this little part here, what it does is it pulls the fabric. So it's not an even feed like this. So when this moves, these feed dogs go up and down. And this is a not good for reverse feed. You don't want to break that. There is a spring in there. So different dual feed. If this little lever pulls it. It's also very important that if you have a D foot on, to engage it. Don't use it without that. If you don't want to use a dual feed for whatever, then go to a 1C or 1 foot. But you can see too, when part of the reason too is this dual feed, if you use it without the dual feed, there's no support there to grab it back here. So see, there's nothing on that part of the feed dogs there. So you're actually losing part of the feed if you use this without dual feed. So when you not using dual feed and you want to use a 9mm stitch, to go to a 1C, and now you can see that this is covering that feed dog, and that's going to help better. So you don't want to use a dual feed unless you're using the dual feed. So make sure you engage that, otherwise you're losing that support and that feed support right there. Okay, so that's the difference between 1C, 1D. And there's not a D foot for everything, obviously, and there's not a C foot for everything. But, so, very often, like, let's see, we'll grab a 63, which I'll do a video on that. The 63 is just 63. It doesn't have a D or a C because that's as wide as it will go. But there are a couple feet for the exception, like the 2 and the 2A. Oops, sorry, 2A. So these are only 5mm stitches, but the 2A is for 9mm. So although it won't do a, so actually let's see this. We'll go 2. So I'll put in 2. And you can see I can only go 5.4, So I told it, so it won't even go to 5.5 because that little bar. And then if I tell it to A, which is for 9mm machines. So let's go to A. It still will only go, well, go 5.5, but that's it. It won't go to 9mm. So, but why is this for 9mm machines? It's because it has a wider base to cover all the feed dogs, because these feed dogs are wider on a 9mm. And that's also the same with a 16 gathering foot. So those are the two exceptions that, although they don't do a 9mm stitch, you would want to make sure that you get a 16 for a 9mm machine. So it's going to have a wider area here to cover the full feed dogs, to get the full effect of the feed dogs, where a 16 for a 5mm machine is narrower. And then that's the same with a 2A. So 2A is for the 9mm to cover the full feed dogs, and 2 is just for the 5.5. Okay, I hope this was informative. Thanks, everybody.